And I'd like to start, maybe, Haim, could you start, just give a brief overview? The students, I'm sure, know you here.
My name is Haim Mendelson. I teach a course called Electronic Commerce. I've been at Stanford for about 18 years. Before that, I taught here a variety of information technology topics. Before Stanford, I taught for 10 years at the University of Rochester in upstate New York, where we could get some snow from time to time. And I came to the U.S. from Israel then 28 years ago. In Israel, I had my PhD in computer science, and I worked in the Logistics Information Systems Center of the Israeli Army as Chief Systems Analyst.
Okay, I'm Joyce Chung. I'm a partner at Cardinal Venture Capital. We're a local small venture fund that focuses on early stage software services investments. So we started that in 2000. Prior to that, I worked at Adobe Ventures, Adobe Systems, Sony Corporation, and a systems integration company called Cambridge Technology Group. Went to Stanford Business School a long time ago. I won't name the year. That's about it.
Trust me, I've got you beat. I'm John Shoch, although I actually do not have an MBA and did not go to the business school, but I was an undergraduate here. And Dennis, I always appreciate coming back to the business school, particularly to this classroom where, and we can talk about it later, where I got arrested and spent a week in jail for something that happened in this room. It was in the middle of the anti-war movement, and it was a ROTC class, and it was a different time and place, let me tell you. But it was also a great experience for negotiation and dealsmanship as well. You learn a lot in demonstrations and confronting the police on campus. I went on to join Xerox at the Research Center when it first started here in Palo Alto. I worked on, for those of you who know these things, the original Alto computer, the Ethernet, the Internet protocols, the IP-TCP protocols, and later did a PhD while in computer science while I was working, and later worked for the chairman and CEO of Xerox at the corporate headquarters. Came back to California, ran the division that was productizing the ideas, the early workstations, laser printers, networks, and so on. Chose not to stay at Xerox in part because it ultimately would have meant spending time in Rochester in the bigger part of the business. And I figured California in the computer business was a little nicer than the copier business and in upstate New York. And for the last 20 years, I've been doing venture capital investments in just about everything associated with computers, software, internet, whatever.
My name is Salman Ullah. I grew up in England, and despite my accent, and then I was an undergraduate in physics, and then I came to Stanford for my PhD, also in physics. Did a couple of postdocs, got married, went to McKinsey, because you have to earn a living once you're married. And then I spent about 8 years at Microsoft doing a variety of things. I did M&A, and most recently I ran the corporate strategy group. And at Google, I run the M&A group, and I've been there about 2 years.
I'm Jenny Zeszut. I am local, born and raised, and grew up within about 15 miles of here. About 15 years focused mostly in marketing, branding, running products. From very traditional P&G, consumer products, brand management kinds of things. And then after business school, traditional business strategy consulting, and then I moved into the internet, and I ran the strategy department at Avenue A Razorfish for 7 years. So hundreds of companies thinking about new products, building internet products, and launching them into the marketplace. Decided I was done with services and moved into the product world at eBay for a little while, very briefly VP of marketing at a startup until just a few months ago when I said it's my turn. And so I have a company that's about 2 months old, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. I figure in spirit of this conversation, I'll talk to you about the trends that I'm tuned into and then tell you a little bit about my company at the end so you can see what has come from at least my thoughts about opportunities out there in the world.
So what I thought would be helpful, I'll just describe some of the kind of projects we've seen in the past, and then I'd like to ask the panelists broadly where they see some opportunities. Some of the projects we had, like last year, we had several that were involved web-based retailing. Not surprising. We also had some in social networking, not surprising. We've had over the years video delivery for sports, for example, soccer. We've had voice, VoIP, and Wi-Fi applications, as well as we've had some students come out of the computer science department, which they were looking at some core technology. And what I'd like to get a sense from the viewpoint of the panelists, and what's so really nice about this group, we have such diversity. We can get a sense of the diversity here. And maybe, John, you could lead off, because you were saying there aren't, where you see some of the real opportunities, and in a broader sense, not in a specific sense. So.
Well, thank you, Dennis, for handing me the baton first. When the first problem is, what is the internet? And it is a phrase that means so many things that it doesn't mean anything, of course. And so when one tries to tease it apart and try to find where are there business opportunities, let me try to put it in some buckets and say a few words about each. There's the internet in the aggregate, and then there are all of the sub-pieces of whatever this is. First of all, the first place where people make money on any new trend is in the conferences and the newsletters. But that's a pretty tough business to stay ahead of it. But you know that an area is hot when you get invited to the $1,000 conference to come see something new. I don't commend those to you as great businesses, though. And as you then tease it apart, the internet has gone through many different pieces, and at the level of core infrastructure, running a carrier, I think that's probably a pretty tough thing to think about. Starting a new infrastructure hard asset business, selling hardware to carriers has recently been a dreadful business, which probably means it's a great opportunity to start a company if there's some new technology. When people aren't buying and everyone's really depressed about a sector, it's the time to start an early stage company. If you had some new technology that I can really anticipate that 2 or 3 years from now I'm going to intercept the next buying cycle on hardware, usually it'll have some substantive technical advantage, some new breakthrough, some new protocol, some new standard that's going to drive that. And I'm always a little counter-cyclical as to what you invest in as an early stage company as opposed to what you invest in the public market. There's many elements of infrastructure there in the hardware side. I think there are probably lots of interesting niche opportunities in software infrastructure. I continue to be stunned by the broad array of tools for managing advertising, tools for managing mailing lists, tools for managing this, that, and the other that may or may not be giant companies, but you find a real problem, you have people with real money that they can spend. Internet retailing, starting another bigbox.com or SICcode.com, you'd have a lot of trouble convincing me that it was time to do pet food again or anything. And then let me just sort of finish in two areas. One where I don't have a good answer, and we have some investments in this area, but if you look at, I was on a panel the other day where we were looking at what is broadband, what is the future of broadband, and when you really dissect the internet and you get through the noise level of VoIP and email and IM and HTML pages, which are really not substantial contributors to the total volume of the bits that travel through, and I've made the joke. There's you look at the modalities. There's sort of text or telegrams. There's telephone. There's television. If we're looking forward. Gene Roddenberry showed us what the next two T's were. So if anybody has one of these, I'd like to do it. The three-dimensional, fully immersive experience of the holodeck on Star Trek. I don't think anybody knows how to do that. And ultimately, teleportation. Beam me up, Scotty. But short of those two, it's video. Video is where the bits are. And so you have to be paying attention to that at the hardware level, at the software infrastructure level, at the YouTube level, which I'll come back to. So it's an area, and I don't have a good beat on this one, but I just know where the bits are and where the interest is. And then that brings us to YouTube, user experience, advertising, eyeballs, where there continue to be lots of interesting ideas. I'm completely jealous that we didn't have a piece of YouTube. I wouldn't have done it if I'd seen it, by the way. Call me stupid, But I passed on Spoke, and I passed on Friendster, and I dodged a bunch of those bullets, and who knew that MySpace was going to kill Friendster? I'm about 30 years too old to figure those out. But the one thing I do know is it's really important to have your head screwed on straight And I had this debate with John Doerr, who was on your board. Is Google a technology company or an advertising company? There are people who still think it's a technology company, and I happen not to believe that. And many of the eyeball-oriented, user-generated content, whatever the current fad is, you really need to get in. And we have a guy who spent his entire career in specialty magazines and computer publications, who understands all about the cost of customer acquisition, subscription rates, churn, lifetime revenue value of a customer, and making the advertising equation work. And then it's sort of, oh, by the way, we got to build something, for whatever this idea is as to how we're going to aggregate eyeballs and make money and monetize and all those buzzwords. That the technology is almost a second order, oh, by the way, after you finish the understanding the advertising model of whatever it is you're trying to do. Hopefully I've insulted enough people around here. We'll have some dialogue. Thank you, guys.
Our focus is more on the software. So, clearly there are some opportunities on the infrastructure side. So I'll focus a little bit more just kind of on the software and application area. If you dump it into sort of the consumer opportunities versus the business opportunities, you could sort of sub-segment from there. I think that, the youth market, on the consumer side, they're clearly, a lot of attention these days is focused on the youth market and, this totally different mode of interaction and communication that this market has created basically through the internet and through mobile devices. And I think there clearly have been some successes from companies that have been built around that. That's something you need to be, as John says, sort of really in sync with those marketplaces. It's about eyeballs. It's about, understanding, what's going to be viral and really take off. And these are these kind of businesses that go like this. And if you don't see that early on, then, probably not a great idea. So that's a whole category that I'm certainly not an expert in. I'm too old for that as well. But I think there are other consumer opportunities, other demographic opportunities. The aging boomers. I think there's some opportunities there to think about. Clearly, there's unique needs, I think, of that demographic, and what are they going to be looking for? Are there services, products, entertainment, communication that you can offer to that segment? On the business side, I think this has kind of gotten short shrift lately, which is kind of why I like it, because I think there's been a lot of attention on the consumer segment. But the businesses still need, buy, and they still buy products and services. And I think the internet has created some opportunities to improve business processes, to change the way companies are doing things. Salesforce.com is obviously the poster child for software as a service. I think there are a lot of opportunities. You can go through a business and basically look at every functional area and say, is there an opportunity to change the way that we do our payroll or do our, accounts receivable or whatever it is. So I think there are definitely opportunities in there, and then you segment by whether you're selling to the enterprise all the way down to small, medium-sized businesses. I think there are definitely some interesting opportunities there. Those are probably the areas the way I would look at it.
I won't say anything about YouTube. We'll move right along. The deal obviously hasn't closed, and we're in a filing. I don't have any insight, so I apologize. But based on the deals we've done, we've done about close to three dozen acquisitions since I got there at Google, and they have almost nothing in common. The only thing they have in common, is that they each have tremendous engineers, computer scientists. We've looked at a few deals where the product was actually quite good and the market position was pretty good, but the engineers weren't very good, and we passed on those deals. So that's the style that we've used. And so I'll give you a feel for the range of deals that we've done. Keyhole, which most people know as Google Earth. It was literally Larry and Sergey kind of found it on their desktop one day, and they said, "Hey, this is cool. We should buy it." And we did. It was it wasn't an extraordinary amount of money, but they clearly had no business model. What they used to do was license it to realtors for whatever it was, $400 a month. They had about 4 people signed up. And when we opened it up, we first of all put the code on our data center, so kind of everyone in the world could access it without everything melting. And you could argue that to this day we don't really have a business model around it, but gee, everyone loves it, right? And so the cool factor, you should do something that you have passion about and expertise, and that overlap is pretty small, actually. And we see a lot of business plans and ideas from people who actually have no clue about what they're talking about. And we see ideas from people who are experts, but they don't really care. And you kind of need both to get something off the ground. Given that, at least the deals we look at, monetization isn't critical. It's not, eyeballs are, then usage does become important. If you have neither, then that's a real problem. And there are lots of businesses like that. I mean, we met with one yesterday who they're on their E round, and they aren't going anywhere. They're just not. And they have 1 million users, and it's not really going anywhere. But they've managed to keep raising money every 6 months. So there's no real specific answer, but I think just you go to our website, you can see all the deals we've done. Just the sheer range would suggest that there's lots of opportunities out there. There are enormous numbers of opportunities, not just in the U.S., not just in Europe, not just in Japan, but in Korea and Vietnam. We're looking at deals in each of those regions, and sometimes maybe you want to leave the U.S. It's a hyper-competitive place. Go somewhere else, and you may realize, gee, PCs aren't that important. Maybe mobile phones are much more important.
If I can ask, of the 36 deals, what was the median price?
That's a great question. I actually know the answer to that, but we haven't disclosed it.
I didn't ask for any of the individual deals. And so the only thing I can assume is that since it's the median and not the mean, that it must be low.
It is low. It is low. It's the order of double-digit millions.
Right. Sort of $1 million per engineer used to be the Microsoft model for a while.
I'd be happy to. So I took a little bit different approach in terms of saying, this is a market, go build something here. I kind of put my thoughts together around ways to think about it. I think, and I wanted to kind of start with my thought on what not to do. Do not go and see what's working right now and see if you can find other things that work kind of like that. That is not the thing to do. Couple of places to look. I think, if something is really working, usually it breaks something else. So, consumer-generated content and community is so big, and, instead of building another community site, the reality is that's breaking lots of other things. That phenomenon of what's going really well is breaking other things. And as an example, traditional marketing, traditional advertising, there are lots of things that are broken right now. So when you see something that's big and hot, look at kind of what's replacing and where was the money flowing before, because maybe it needs to flow into a new place. Other thoughts, skate to where the puck is going to be. I'll just use the community stuff as an example right now, but there's all these communities. That's the reality. That's where we are right now. Instead of building another one, which is where we are today, what does 5 years from now kind of take some of these trends that are hot now to their logical conclusions, or some possible conclusions? Is there an identity kind of issue in 5 years because there's so many community sites and you want to be a participant in so many, and you need not a V card, it's a me card, and it's got all this, it continues and goes with you wherever you want and keeps your passwords, whatever. But skate to where the puck is going to be. Take a look at what's going on now and kind of try to project out and try to figure out what the problems are going to be in the future. This is a mantra that you should have even when you do start your company, which is build for the smart and sell to the dumb. There are lots of dumb companies doing lots of dumb things, and they will buy lots of things. You can take their money, and that's good, but don't build for them. Don't build what they want. Find the handful of companies that are actually doing something really smart and really innovative, and build for them, and then sell it to all the dumb ones. Let's see, what else? What other goodies do I have in here? Back to basics. Internet, everyone kind of thinks about internet as like it's changed everything and it's revolutionized everything. And it has in some ways, but there are fundamentals of business which have not changed. And if you think about what are some of the core things that do not change, that were true about how businesses worked 100 years ago, what can you do in the technology space today? How can you use that technology to do those things even better? Listening to customers, innovating your product, building better products. Like this was true hundreds of years ago, and this will be true in 100 years. How do you use the technology that we have today to actually do those basics even better? Back to your comment, what do you believe? What do you know? And what do you believe? At my company, we have a wall, which is I believe. And it is, that kind of passion and that kind of knowing something in your gut, and you build something that solves that problem. Watch spectacular failures. There's lots of examples of successes, but sometimes you see those little nuggets of just disastrous failures. How could you make sure that other companies don't go through those types of things? I like to look at spectacular failures. Other things, there's lots of things which are kind of doing really, really well, but they're optimized for the masses. No offense, but Google has to be. Its proposition is kind of all things to all people. And whether you type in a search for philosophy or you type in a search for, a blue iPod that's under $49, you're going to kind of get back very similar things. And I know there's some recent announcements, and that's all a good trend. But, or whether it's AOL. AOL was kind of all things to all people, and there are whole businesses that spun off taking little pieces of that. CNET grew out of AOL's channel around technology, and they just took that one little idea and just decided to do it a lot better. So there are lots of things which are doing a really good job, but they kind of by definition have to be all things to all people. What would that look like if you were to take one dimension of it or one piece of it and just and blow it out and make it really, really relevant? Instead of going a half an inch deep in insight, pick one little thing that you're going to go a mile deep in terms of in insight. And then my last one is, if you find a good URL, just start a company around that, because that's actually the hardest thing, is like naming your company. So if you find a good URL, just like start that one. Yeah. So in summary, I would say that it's be useful, solve problems, think about real problems that that you experience, that you feel and you really feel strongly and passionately about, and do what you know. Trying to do something you don't know is kind of doomed for failure. If you don't believe it, and if you don't know it, and if you don't have engineers who are as good as it gets, or at least just brilliant minds around the table, it's going to be tough. So be useful and do what you know. Those are my thoughts.
So I guess Joyce, John, Salman, and Jenny covered all the interesting areas. So I'll talk briefly about one area which is not so interesting. and it has to do with the convergence of the real world and the internet. And the notion that, the way I think about it, when I started in computing some years ago, the ratio of people in the world to computers was roughly 20,000. And none of these computers had a radio, because you couldn't carry them anywhere anyway. And today these ratios are approaching 1, some would argue above 1, and all of them have radios, which means that the computer and you are converging. And the question is, what are the implications of that? And so a sub-area of that is what people call the Internet of Things, And the sub-area of that is if you look at supply chain management, RFID and its implications, but all of these are part of one bigger area, which is the convergence of the internet world and the real world, which used to be separate and now they're merged. And it has some implications on consumers because you can't separate anymore a consumer from a person in business because they have this device all the time. It has implications on a lifestyle, but it has implications on business as well. So when I try to subdivide this area into, I guess we can do after 2 by 2, right? 2 by 2 is the maximum you can do in business school. So you can think about infrastructure. So the question is, what is the infrastructure that we need to support these kinds of applications and the applications themselves? And you can think about structured data, RFID. You're talking about very structured data. You're talking about a set of standards which have already been agreed upon. And you can argue, and I believe, that most of the data will be unstructured data because when you carry this thing with you, you won't let anybody tell you really how the data should look like. And different vendors will have different concepts on how they want to do that. So you have structured versus unstructured, infrastructure versus applications. And let's block one box already because today, if it's application, it's unstructured. You don't have the infrastructure, so you're going to die because the infrastructure is not there. So you have 3 boxes left, and I think each of them is less interesting than the other areas. But what I'm left with.
We have 3 investments in RFID and logistics of various forms. It's a great area.
Are there any, as you think about this, it's really interesting the different perspectives we have. Are there any underlying trends that you really see, just broad demographic trends or broad technology trends or broad trends like, Haim, you've been mentioning, that really, as a way of just thinking about opportunities, might be helpful to the students as they think about opportunities? So you ride that trend in the long term, then you know those trends are going to happen, basically, and you're trying to partake in those. Are there any thoughts along those lines? Solid.
I think online advertising is a pretty good. I frankly, I'm continually impressed by how backward we are in the U.S. I was in Korea just, I think, a month ago. And, I take out my phone. Of course, it doesn't work because the standards are no good. And I look over, can I borrow your phone? And it's like, oh, my God, I want one of these. And so that's kind of interesting that maybe it'll come the other way. Maybe you guys should go there and bring technology back to the U.S. Rather than, historically at least, in the last 20th century, it's gone the other way. Everything, was created here and then moved out of the U.S. So I think, just IQ trends may be interesting. Maybe there's more IQ outside the U.S. than there is within the U.S. And that maybe we should go to the other seminar on education. Can we help fix that? Because as I tell my kids, it's not the kids class you're competing with, it's the ones in Asia who work like twice as hard as you do. And partly it's because they have to, otherwise you just don't get there. The resources are so limited. But I think it's really going to hurt our businesses also. And this privileged position we're all in here in Silicon Valley in particular, it's not a birthright. It's just not a birthright. I mean, I grew up in England. I mean, they still tell us about the British Empire. It's over, guys. It's no longer the fact. And so I think we should, overall do everything. The trends are there, and we kind of sometimes are in denial. Oh no, we're still a superpower, hyperpower, because we go around killing people. But let's be more productive about these things.
So I have to respond to a couple of those. And I guess I would have to say I continue to be stunned by how broad and deep the opportunity is for advertising, and I have called this wrong. I do, however, every time I now fly on an airplane and you fold down the seat, the tray rather in front of you, and there's a goddamn ad there. It's like, how many more ads can we tolerate? Are we going to spray paint them on the road so you read them as you drive? And yet I just continue to underestimate the sort of tolerance of the international community for advertising. And God bless you. And we are doing companies that depend on advertising. And I just don't know where the breaking point is, but we have somehow never come near it, which is astonishing. Except for those of us who support PBS radio and so on in order to not listen to the ads. And so I think you're right. In spite of my curmudgeon-like behavior, I think it's fair to say there's a trend. The advertising continues, although I will look forward to the day when we hit its limit. I do struggle a little bit on domestic versus foreign markets and technology, and I would like to disagree a little bit because, again, this is one that I know a lot about, are the more advanced cell phones in Asia. By the way, and we should talk sometime because I know Google's doing some work in this, but I'm on the board of a company which provides the embedded Linux, which is the core for many of these advanced phones. Millions of phones are running Linux, the Linux operating system, in a very specialized version in Japan, in China, in Korea, and elsewhere. Now, that technology comes from the U.S. The design and the manufacturing are in Asia. It's really, the Motorola phone, which is one of the first Linux phones, the design win for that was with a team in China, and the processor design was not won by Motorola, it was won by Intel, but it was won by Intel with the ARM processor, which did come from the UK, by the way, and the software was ours. Now, the striking thing about Korea is the penetration of broadband into homes. Oh, by the way, you have to go look at the number of multifamily units in apartment buildings, and so it's never, it's an easy number to quote, but it's never quite the same. So I think there are clearly very important markets abroad. I haven't yet seen a lot of examples. There's a handful of examples of new and unusual technology which have come from abroad. I find that in many cases the technology starts here, but it doesn't get developed or exploited very well here. And that's unfortunate. In terms of other trends, I think it's, the trend that I think is fair to be confident in is that the next release of major software from the Gorilla of the North will be worse than the prior release.
It's twice as big.
And twice as big, and will require a new machine that will break everything you currently have on your machine. I'm a little jaundiced over all this. But at the same time, there are opportunities in security. I think, we are clearly a mobile society, and the cell phone, which I think is a terrible device, but you have to count the numbers of them, and the numbers are unbelievable. It's estimated this year it's going to be north of 950 million, and there's sort of a side bet as to whether it's going to be 1 billion this year. Maybe you have an opinion this year or next, or anybody else does. So clearly, things that leverage, large numbers of consumer-oriented devices are they're great market opportunities. If you sell a little widget that costs 14 cents that goes into a cell phone, you might have a really good business. And I'll let others opine on the advertising and the applications that go with it.
So I guess, mobility was going to be one that I would echo of John. Clearly, huge opportunity. This is how most of the world is going to experience the internet, is through a mobile device versus a PC, which is a very U.S.-centric perspective, I think. So I think mobility opens up new opportunities for applications, for payment systems. I think electronic payments is another trend that overlaps there. I think in general, we're moving from a cash-based society to a cashless society, and so what are you look at a company like PayPal was created around, this person-to-person payments. What are the other opportunities as people move away from, our traditional, cash-based payments? Anytime there's that, that's a trend that's clearly moving in that direction. I think in the media world, this is clearly already happening, but, all the media is becoming digital. So we're moving from very analog, audio, video, everything's digitized. What are the opportunities around that? How you create that content, distribute it, sell it, monetize it or share it. I think there's clearly opportunities there that some of which have already been capitalized on. But I think the way we experience digital media, even 5 years from now, is going to be very different from what we do today. I think
there's still quite a bit of legacy that, and you know, if you just think of at home your own audio system, you know, my husband is constantly frustrated by his inability to kind of get the music where he wants in the home, you know, because we don't quite have, it's the whole chain isn't worked out yet. So there's opportunities, I think, to actually kind of make that a very smooth user experience. I think we're not there yet. I think, you know, we're going to see still a lot of changes in that space. There are a few trends, I think, on the consumer side.
So one trend that we always have, everything goes from 1.0 to 2.0, and then from 2.0 to 3.0, and so on. And of course, it happens to the web as well, and that's an important trend. And it's interesting to compare it to, 1.0 really comes from software releases. So think about Windows 1.0. Anybody remembers Windows 1.0? 1985. You had all these floppies, and you spent some hours starting it, and you wrote when, and the system crashed, right? And Microsoft, I think, hardly admitted it's their software at that point. Win 2.0, they fixed many of the bugs, but that was about it, right? And the media were a little different. And the real first version of Windows that real people were using was 3.0, arguably 3.1. Right? So 3.1 was the real one, but was just an improvement over 3.0. And what made 3.0 and 3.1 usable is some improvements in memory management, user interface, but importantly, it was preloaded on PCs, right? So distribution. And the relationships with the software applications, which were the two elements that really made the difference between 2.0 and 3.0. Coming back to Web 1.0, I guess from 1.0 to 2.0, a lot of the ideas we hear about today are fixing the bugs in 1.0. And a lot of it is, as John pointed out earlier, there are lots of opportunities for conferences and publications. So Tim O'Reilly actually is the person who came up with the concept of Web 2.0, and he had a strong incentive to do it. And he has a nice article about what it is, and it's really very well written, but when you read all of it, you say, well, it's really almost everything. So when I was thinking about what is there that's actually I think that the core of what he's saying is that Web 2.0 is the web as a platform. And I think that's actually an important trend that I want to say two words about. The idea that rather than construct things, we can mix and match things, which is something that was the dream in software again since the 80s. I think it's actually happening, and the concept that you can provide applications as web services, both in the consumer world and in the enterprise world, I think is a major development in the sense that once the infrastructure exists, then you have the ability for entrepreneurs to actually create, to convert an idea to software and have a platform that actually uses that software and scales it into a large number of users. So I think that there is I think this is an important trend, and to my mind, again, there are two types of opportunities there. One, a kind of building it, which I think that is just too big a job for most people. But taking advantage of it is something that we already see happening, and we could talk about some of the applications later.
So since you talked about Windows 3.0, I cannot resist the two classic Microsoft jokes. My apologies to anybody who still works for Microsoft. How many Microsoft engineers does it take to change a light bulb? And the first answer is 1, but he has to do it 3 times before he gets it right. And the same joke, how many Microsoft engineers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is 0, because they get the marketing department to declare darkness to be the standard. Can't resist.
Jenny, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Trying to think of some new things. I think that I think that the consumer reality that we're in, I think is really, really similar to the days of the Renaissance. There is a new technology which has enabled a change in consciousness. I think it's just important to be aware of and tuned into. I think the need for self-expression, the democratization of expertise, the new appreciation for design and beauty and those types of things. Questioning the old institutions of whether it be commerce or religion or advertising or government and all of those types of things. I mean, some of those kind of major trends in shifts in consciousness of the Renaissance, I think we are in that phase right now. And I think that, a couple of those trends, like the democratization of expertise and people feeling like they have a voice, and not only do they want to express their opinion, but they're going to, and they're going to put it everywhere. The volume of what's out there kind of leads to another trend. And I really think that the next 10 years of huge trend, if the last 10 years were indexing the world's information and getting it all out there and giving a voice to all of these people, the next 10 years is about curation and this word of this notion of curator. People are going to be very happy to pay for someone to tell them what to pay attention to. And RSS readers are nice if you know exactly what you should be tuned into. Most people aren't, and I think there's, the intelligence placed on the mass amounts of data is probably the next challenge.
So we've had all these broad trends. If you were to look about and kind of identify some companies that you view that have some promise, maybe startups or some early stage companies that might exemplify some of these trends, or you can identify, say, companies in this area, if you could identify a couple of companies just for the students to get an appreciation of what you might see as some successful companies, not that they will be, but they might be.
I'll tell you one that I don't understand, which is frightening because, of course, I'm so smart I understand all companies. They're actually variations on the theme. There's one in England, I think there's one launched here, that lets people lend each other money. Complete strangers can lend each other money. And I looked at this about a year ago, and we kind of tossed it around, and everyone just scratched their head like, we don't get it. But in another form, the Nobel Prize was just given for it. And so, there's got to be something there, you would think. So I think it shows that there are interesting companies out there that may actually not work, but it's not clear why. And maybe they need to be morphed or stuck into something else to make it obvious. Maybe they're just in the wrong market for whatever reason. So I think I want to show that, make it clear to you that this Googleplex, etc., has no idea of what's going on in the world. I mean, we kind of do two things. We make money through advertising, and we let people search, and now and then we give them applications that sometimes they use and sometimes they don't. And it's very much a hit and miss affair. So, you can kind of just try all sorts of things. I spoke to the guys who are doing this peer-to-peer lending, and again, they're very passionate about it. And they knew all the lending laws, and they got approvals from the Bank of England, and blah, 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 blah. So they had tremendous expertise also, right? Are they making money? No. But, maybe they will, and maybe Citibank will buy them. I don't know. It's a bizarre situation.
There's a company at Payday down in Texas that's doing payday loans for short periods of time, which is apparently making a ferocious amount of money. But no, they've managed to sidestep. Apparently, part of it is that they make it up on the fees rather than on the interest. It's a very complicated one. Dennis, I thought I'd share one example, if I may, of sort of, it's not quite Web 1.0 and 2.0, but it's an evolution of an idea. And sort of the parameters that led to a phenomenal failure, and then how you sort of recast the problem and hopefully have knock on wood, a big success. So some of you may recall Webvan, which was one of these phenomenal flameouts, doing same-day delivery, initially of food, but it was meant to be a broader platform. And it was very ambitious in an era when everything was possible and all the rules had changed, but of course they really hadn't. And the business model included owning the inventory itself, owning owning the warehouse, owning the trucks, and ferocious amount of capital required and allocating those resources and keeping them utilized, and the thing ultimately blew a giant hole in the ground. And we managed to dodge that bullet. Thank you. What we learned from it, and then backed a guy who had been an executive at Webvan, and his observation was people really love same-day delivery. I mean, the immediate gratification for certain kinds of things is extremely valuable, but you don't want to own the assets. That's the worst thing you can do, is to own the trucks and the labor and the infrastructure that goes with it. But you sure would love to be able to facilitate more same-day delivery. And the idea which they came up with was to be the computerized intermediary between the people who want to deliver things and the people who deliver things. And it turns out those already exist. You don't need to start the warehouse and you don't need to own the truck. That you can go to nationwide retailers who have local inventory. You can go to distributors. There's a whole array of companies who would like to have things delivered, and some of them have their own truck fleets, and they know what a dreadful business that is. And on the other hand, you have an existing group of couriers who are in the business of delivering things same day, going from point A to point B. They have the trucks, they have people who get paid, they worry about keeping everybody busy, and so on. And if you could figure out how to be in the middle of that, maybe you could make money there. And therefore, this company, Incenda, has built a system where, on the one hand, the customers tend to be large enterprises that have regional or local inventory, either from individual stores or from a distribution center, and they're trying to do lots of items delivered same day. And the couriers that you contract with, who generally have excess capacity, and if you show up and say, I can give you 20 more deliveries a day, would you like to do these for me at a slight discount to the normal rate that you charge, because I have to find some margin in this process somewhere. And the key thing is a computer system with a sort of web direct feed into the computer systems of the guys who are delivering things. And that could be thousands of orders from one distributor per day nationwide, directly through the computer systems into the web terminals of the courier companies, and getting a confirmation back with insurance and reliability and coverage that is at or better than FedEx. And the charm of this business is we make money while we sleep, and the computers run. And so it's a recasting of a business that played to a very important human desire, same-day delivery, immediate gratification, but did it in a way that leveraged computers rather than hard assets.
So I have a couple that I think are interesting. So one is in our portfolio as well. It's a company that was actually, it's run by a graduate from here, a Sloan graduate here. And it was originally not a very interesting business. In fact, I looked at it when it was being recapitalized. It was like a $1 million pre. I mean, it was a software application, PC-based software application for writing reviews, right? So this is HR software running on your PC. So, of course, I passed on that deal, but Dave Strom did it. He was an earlier investor, and he just decided to keep the company going. And what they managed to do was to take that application and rewrite it so it's running on a server, all delivered over the internet. And it turns out, it's a company called SuccessFactors. We came in at a later round at a much more expensive price, but they have over 350 customers in the world. And it turns out that every company out there writes reviews every year, and so it's a great application that to be delivered over the internet, because you've got lots of people. These are 360 reviews. You've got managers and peers and people writing about other people, and maybe they're in different locations. And it kind of forces everybody. There's a workflow component to it. Forces everybody to get it done. And companies will pay every year to get this sort of mundane task on a software as a service basis. And annually they renew their subscriptions, and it's become a really nice business, and they're expanding into other HR functions as well. So I think it's a
it's an interesting way to say, how do you take an existing business process and apply, new technology, internet-based technology that's going to make it a lot better and a lot more interesting for customers, in a nice business model, which is a recurring revenue stream. Another one that I think is an interesting one, I don't know if this one's going to be successful, but I like it because it's cool. It's kind of got that cool factor. It's that site called Zillow. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's just, and they probably did a mashup of, technologies that were out there and kind of put this web services and put it together. And it's pretty neat. I mean, you go and you can look and see, put in an address of a home, and you can see how much that home is valued at. And they kind of, they take data from, I guess, I'm not even sure what all the data is, but they, from comparables in the neighborhood, and they kind of estimate what the value of that house is. And so you can go look at your neighbor's house and see. But it's cool.
Does anybody use Zillow more than once to check out their house and their neighbor's?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you can go back and it actually changes. I've noticed that my house
always goes up. Price always
right,
goes up.
right. But I don't know if they're going to be successful at monetizing that. And I saw Keyhole, and I thought that is a cool company, and I wanted to invest in them, but we already had a deal in the location-based services space, so they didn't want to kind of share too much, and they were probably in acquisition discussions already. But there is something when you build something that's so compelling that people come and they come again, probably you've built something of value.
Well, I can't help but talk about my own company, and I will give another example, but I did want to tell you, I mean, you've kind of heard my thoughts and ideas and the kinds of things that I think about, and my background. I'm a marketer through and through, and I have, I am in the brand world and been in the smoky room deciding, I want them to think this. Yes, we'll shoot it out to them across every single, one-way megaphone communication channel that I can think of. And if we say we're cool, they will think we're cool. And that doesn't work anymore. That's broken. And I have, over $1 trillion of money in brand advertising. And I don't know what to do. I look out across this sea of user reviews and blogs, and it's growing so fast, and it looks like complete chaos to me. So in my theme of curation and in going a mile deep in intelligence rather than an inch deep across everything, we are building a service that allows companies to tune in to what really matters, allow marketers and product managers and people who are really building and responsible for growing products to listen to that community that exists out there that's talking, and use it to flow that insight into optimizing your marketing and making better products, and just using it to be much more intelligent. So there's lots of pieces to it. So I think it's a fabulous business idea. Other ones, there's actually a really cool company that's going to launch in a couple of weeks. They're called Swivel, and the reason why I like it, they have found, once again, there's data everywhere, and how do you kind of know what you're looking for in there? And they've built something where basically you can take any data source. They found patterns, and there's a universal number of patterns that data can fall into, and any source of data that you can find flows into the Swivel tool and immediately becomes available to be viewed in multiple dimensions. So you can kind of go through and just kind of take a look at data sets and go, ooh, that's interesting right there, and then you drill down and you kind of do your analysis on it. So it's pretty interesting, and I think it's going to be used in really interesting ways. Right now, you need to know what you're looking for and then go try to find it, but you don't always know what you're looking for. You don't know what's interesting until you really get into it and you have some kind of an agent bubble those ideas up to you. So, it's a couple examples.
To give opportunity for our students, I'd like to ask a couple of broad questions, and then we'll open it up for the panel. But our teams here are looking ways to really identify opportunities and forming teams and in brainstorming. Could you give them any advice as they start to look at these opportunities, to form their teams, how to go about brainstorming, how to think about going forward to basically think about a venture and think about putting a team together. Joyce?
Can I just start with some thoughts? Number one, keep a notebook. I have an Ideation notebook, which I've kept for 17 years. I should probably sell it on eBay or something. But every time God, why can't I find a way to do this? Or, God, this is so annoying. Or any time of moment of frustration, write it down. So just keep that with you at all times. I think that some kind of a repository for everybody's thoughts and ideas as you kind of go and you hear nuggets of ideas out there. Product ideas, business ideas, questions will kind of come up, or if you see two things together, you're like, ooh, what would Zillow be like if it were, whatever it was. So kind of have a central repository for all those ideas that, whether it's a blog or a wiki or however you want to build it. But I think something virtual like that, where all ideas can go immediately, that's a premise behind the product that we're building to help companies do a better job at ideation, is help them capture ideas when they happen, where the inspiration happens. And so those are a couple thoughts about just brainstorming in general.
I think, the toughest thing is to be honest with yourself, because you get very caught up and you think you're smarter than everyone. You may well be, but it doesn't mean the idea is good. It's a multifaceted thing getting a good idea off the ground. So I think, you should try to be really honest with yourself, and which is hard. So why don't you ask someone you don't know to consider your idea, and then they can give you, pretty unvarnished feedback. We do that when we're looking at deals. We kind of throw the deals around, and you'd be surprised how sometimes, people's opinions change all the way, and the one who was pro becomes con, the one who was con becomes pro, and then we're still confused. It just goes to show that debating with people who actually don't really care whether your idea succeeds or fails is a good thing.
The biggest struggle for me is the dialectic that emerges when the question is customers are always right. Go talk to customers. So on the one hand, that is a very smart thing to do. Talk to customers, try your ideas, brainstorm, see if they puke on them, see if they understand it. And yet at the same time, you have to step back and say, does this customer really know what he's talking about? Is this customer trying to solve a short-term problem, which is not a trend? He's trying to solve his problem. Is there any reason to believe that this customer is representative of the full universe of customers? Does this customer have enough imagination to figure out how to lead the puck? And I do not have a way to cut through this Gordian knot, that this sort of, you can't not go talk to customers. It is incredibly valuable. And then you have to figure out how to apply some judgment to what you hear back. And for me, that's always the toughest thing. That if it's a complete no-brainer that every customer knows exactly what they want and it's obvious, then there's probably too many people who can do that. And you're solving a problem that isn't big enough and isn't far enough away. And yet you have the passion and an idea, and you show it to somebody and they have no idea what you're talking about or why that would be valuable. Well, was that a good or bad customer interaction? And it's really hard, but you just have to go wrestle with this.
I think to add to that, I think if you have a really visionary idea, like Google maybe, you might not get the kind of feedback that you want because customers aren't thinking that long term and they're not thinking that big. So I think that is a dilemma. I guess I would just emphasize again, find an area that you have some unique expertise in and knowledge and understanding, because when we look at teams, if you don't have something specific that you're bringing to the table, your credibility. We're just looking at reducing risk. So, if you can assemble a team where you have expertise in this area somewhere amongst the team, in the market problem that you're solving, that's going to make a big difference for you. Somebody who's kind of lived it and breathed it. And then the other thing I'd say is, sort of look off the beaten path. There's some obvious startups ideas out there, and there are probably 30 people doing it. And the other thing we do is we say, if there are more than 5 or X number of companies in the space, no thanks, because that market is just going to be, probably destroyed because everybody's going to keep lowering their prices, and then, there is no market at the end of the day. So I think, it doesn't have to be the sort of sexy idea. Look off the beaten path. I think sort of this counter-cyclical, think about the counter-cyclical trends that are happening and
we want to be there where the market's eventually going to be, not necessarily where it is today.
What I think would be helpful now is open for questions, and would you please identify which panelists? Are there any questions you'd like from the panelists? Yes.
This question, I guess, is for John. You talked a lot about video. Where do you see that trend going post YouTube? Is that? Are there any parallels that we can draw from other industries that can give us a clue of what opportunities there will be in the future?
Well, if I had the brilliant insight as to what it was going to be, I'd be investing in it. I sure thought we'd talk about it here. So
Nice try.
And we have an investment in the IPTV space, so I know a little bit about it. Clearly, there are multiple pieces of it. The infrastructure, DSL delivery, how do you get broadband, how do you get real-time TV, how do you get HD TV? There's this tremendous momentum and some hard technical problems. There are some new standards coming out for the next generation of ADSL and VDSL, and so there's some chip companies. There's a lot of pieces of that infrastructure. We have a company, Caseno, which is in the middleware software, video on demand, putting the whole systems together to get TV into your house. There is, however, this tension, again, is broadcast TV meaningful anymore? I mean, do we have the Ed Sullivan Hour where everybody is at their TV on Sunday nights at a particular day? And there are lots of people who, even just with a TiVo box, do not watch broadcast TV. They watch recordings of broadcast TV, and it's changing viewing patterns, and it's threatening the advertisers, and this is a real mess here. So there's so many different dimensions to that. I think as in many things, we will see more customization, and that's probably a result of be it TiVo or if anybody's a hobbyist, there's this wonderful thing which I cannot figure out how to invest in. Myth TV is an open source. Do you have one deployed? Yeah, I'm about to put one in. It is really cool.
Really big geek though, so.
It's TiVo on steroids, or it's Kaleidoscape. If anybody knows what that, you got to be an audiovisual geek to do this, but it's really cool. Now, how the hell do we make any money at that? I don't know. And so, but the customization of recording, doing your own channels and so on. YouTube is a piece of that, and again, I don't quite know where. I'll leave it to the wizards of monetization to figure out what to do with that. And there's this debate over. Wonderful book, which is overdone a bit, but there's elements of interesting stuff, is the long tail. And so, are you going to make all your money on the top 100 movies? Or are you going to make your money on the 8 million things of, the guy who wants to see the rugby game from New South Wales last month and will pay $7 to see that, or $17 if he's a complete nut. And so is the world, is that where the margin is? Is it in the long tail, or is it in the top 100 movies that are cost $5.95 and are pretty obvious and there's no leverage in there? So I don't have a brilliant, narrow, specific insight. I just know that there's just a lot happening there, and it is the highest bandwidth modality for human communication. It's through your eyes and ears at the same time, and it's going to be happening. And if you got the idea, please come see me.
So I'm certainly interested in John's thoughts as a self-described curmudgeon, but if anybody else has other opinions, I'd like to hear them too. What is going to be the thing that transforms the aging baby boomers that aren't really using computers that much or handheld technology and really think cell phones are evil? What's going to be the way to really capture that market with consumer-based technologies?
Oh, there's a deal out there that's trying to do this. And you can sign up. Just on this narrow one. I don't know if anybody has run across Marty Cooper, who's really the godfather of the cell phone at Motorola and really built it out. And he and his wife Arlene have a company that they're selling cell phones for aging baby boomers. And so it's the simplified stripped-down phone, and it has just a handful of buttons. It has a concierge button, so you can call and talk to somebody, a real person. There's a monthly service fee that goes with it. And they have a whole strategy of how to, service this market of people who don't like cell phones, who don't like smaller buttons, who don't like 17 menu levels to try to do something. And so there will be a whole bunch of those kinds of products that are going to emerge.
There are a few areas. One is, caring elder care. So, there are a bunch of startups that I think are focused on that. Home care, and can you with some of these extended networks, so can you monitor your health, vital signs or whatever, can you monitor all that stuff and send that over the internet to your kids? And so there's some interesting applications of new technologies, I think, that can be used for the home or care market. There's also, when you think about baby boomers are living longer, they want to be active longer. What are the, I've seen some that are focused on, brain exercises, right? But, they're retiring, but they, how do you stay engaged? And so from a wellness perspective, there are communities that are being established. How do you keep your brain active? Maybe it's even taking on work, through the internet. So there's kind of the wellness aspect of it. What else have I seen? So I think there's a few angles to it, but definitely, there's also this trend where people don't live near their family anymore, right? Your parents and your kids and your brother and your all. So how do you kind of create the closeness, and can you do that through technology?
So we're mainly talking about the IT industry, but in terms of there's a whole other set of opportunities in the life sciences side, and we do both in our firm. And we have investments that a lot of people guffaw over, but when you look at the numbers, it is an astonishing business for aging baby boomers who have tremendous vanity, for a discretionary medical procedure that no insurance company covers, that people are willing to write really big checks for, and today put up with a gruesome process, which is hair transplants. And automating and reducing the cost of a medical procedure to do this. It is a pure vanity play, but you never have to worry about insurance reimbursement because there is none. And it is a gigantic business.
I've actually undergone it.
You went to the wrong company.
Years ago, we Microsoft bought Web TV, and it was surprising. Actually, a large number of the users were more elderly, and that, for a variety of reasons, Web TV never worked. But as a business, but it's surprising that people like Comcast and all those local monopolies haven't actually exploited it, especially now that there's a real two-way path to the set-top box. Use that TV interface as a computing environment for people who don't particularly want to type www all day. So I think it's a huge opportunity, and unfortunately they're local monopolies, so their incentives are limited. But perhaps if you build something for them, they might even give you $1 for each set-top box, possibly.
Question from anyone. What do you think about the notion of cheap appliances that run essentially internet software? And so maybe an extreme example is MIT's $100 laptop, which I think now is $150, but nevertheless, 1 million of those in 2 or 3 years to countries that don't even have infrastructure. And the U.S. version of that, I think it's a disruptive technology, because if you imagine a box that's $150, which you can download lots of various things to that are free. How do you see a business opportunity in that, or what do you see that doing to the current market?
Nick Rapani is the big proponent of this. I'm a longtime skeptic. You do have to do it in the context of what market and what problem you're trying to solve. A defeatured, so let's start with the U.S. A defeatured stripped-down PC is a defeatured stripped-down PC. And there isn't much between where PCs are now and some other place that you want to be. The alternative answer is this. If you're trying to do basic communication, and you can now do video on some of them, you can do your email, you can do web browsing with a dreadful experience, but you can do it. And to try to find a design point in the U.S. between a cell phone that you carry with you and a desktop PC, I don't believe it.
Give me 2 examples.
Sure.
So like an asterisk-based answering machine at home.
Oh, sorry, time out. If you're talking about a personal computer user interaction class, that's what I've described. Clearly, a black box that runs Linux, you can buy those for $100 today, and you can get a mini chassis and do a bunch of stuff.
They don't answer your phone. They don't give you a 6-level answering machine menu. They don't give you a barcode scanner.
Yeah, if you're into Asterisk, which is another great one, and some people have actually done an investment and may have skunked me on that one, I don't know. But you can now buy. The guys at Digium are about to do their own box that's going to have a stripped down piece of hardware, special purpose box just to run Asterisk. Still, and if they don't get it right, somebody else will.
So sorry, just to belabor it a little bit. So like, there's tons of these applications now. There's, if I have a wireless home, I could scan anywhere in my home a barcode and make a shopping list that could be mailed to my cell phone. I could, all these things. But there's a market of things that are too simple for a PC, and a PC doesn't bolt onto your refrigerator. But the actual hardware cost is in the tens of dollars.
Well, let me push back again. I mean, so if we're not talking about user experiences, which is my first set of comments, then what you're talking about is what's known very broadly as the embedded computing market, which is an extremely well-known, understood market of dedicated processors, software, specific devices that is a broad and deep market with a gazillion different things, all the way from the original Curbango radio to very cheap device. I mean, every device that the Linksys division of Cisco makes is an embedded system which sits in your home, which has a very low-cost piece of hardware that's often been designed in Taiwan and manufactured in China, and probably costs $30 or less. And you can argue whether that happens the right feature set, and if you want to build a product which is an embedded device to meet a particular function, that's a great thing to do. The trick when we look at it as investors is you can identify and spec a really wonderful product, but is that a company? And so you can do the product, you can sell the design, and is there any underlying technology that gives you any protection? Is there a second act? Is there anything that would get you other than a product? There are people who do generic platforms for embedded computing. There are little boards that are this big, and lots of people build things around them and sell them for lots of things. By the way, there are many more computers that are in embedded devices than there are in PCs and desktop stuff, and people don't understand. The most diverse operating system in the world is not Microsoft. It's the stuff that's in the embedded systems.
And I guess if you were going to focus on sort of an appliance or device focused on a certain application, I'd think about how do you make money from the software, the service that you're going to run on that, right? I mean, is there an opportunity there? The hardware part of it, is usually not, the interesting investment piece.
I remember when I was in Fry's and I went to buy an Ethernet switch, and I worked on the original Ethernet, and I never would have dreamed, and it was like, $50, and it was discounted to $25. God, I got to buy one of these. And I went to the cash register, and the guy said, "Oh no, that's marked wrong. It's $9." And I said, "Wait, cancel the sale. I got to go pick up 2 more." I mean, they're disposable at this point. Now, how in the hell did anybody make money on a device that sold at Fry's for $9? I don't get it.
So I think one of the most interesting things that's happening in technology right now is sort of the notion of virtual worlds. Like Second Life is an amazing example of that. I think it's surprising it's taken so long for Second Life to come out, given how long we've seen online gaming move in that direction. And I saw Jonathan Shorts the other day, the CEO of Sun, talk about how he thinks in the future, all board meetings are going to be conducted in Second Life, and you're going to have a lot more people sort of interacting there. And there seems to be some interesting business opportunities there. American Apparel will build like a store in Second Life, and I think I heard Citibank is going to open like a virtual bank in Second Life. And I was wondering if you've seen any, this is very, very new stuff, but I was wondering if you've seen any business opportunities sort of involving virtual worlds and building on top of this pretty interesting platform.
I said I wasn't going to talk about our self-realization companies.
Yeah. So if anybody knows Byron Reeves in, what is Byron in the, it's a building used to be the law school, the Media X project, or whatever it is. They have some really cool work on this. And he and his graduate students have done, talk about a great degree program to be in. Your thesis is about studying game behavior. These guys really have a hoot. And so I have an opinion on this because we have a company in this space, and we have looked at the entertainment space itself is a great business, and you got to figure out how to monetize it, who makes money, and is it EA, and so on. And I'm not an expert at that. We have looked hard at solving business problems, having commercial interactions embedded within a real honest-to-God game. And there have been some interesting ideas about this, that you can, because you're marshaling 1 million users, so you can have a piece of the game is about having 1 million users along the way earning points for solving a problem which is about pattern recognition. But the pattern recognition could be of the faces of the people who are going through a metal detector at the airport, and there are a million people trying to make some judgment about these people. And you go, gee, now that's how you leverage the mass of the game within the game, and with the game incentives and all the rest that goes with it. And for those of you who are gamers, you can take your points and go sell them on eBay and transfer them back in, and there's a subterranean economy and the whole thing. So we've dug in all this. And we have not yet seen the path to embed business processes within the live, ongoing games. However, we have studied a lot of the psychodynamics, the behavioral characteristics of what goes on in a game. How do you keep people entranced? Why do they come back? I mean, these numbers are staggering. I mean, people who have full-time jobs who spend 40 to 50 hours, a week in the game, and you go, how do they do this? Get a life. And some people will extract money from them. But the behavior, the motivation, the incentives, the reward structures, the way the social dynamics work, can you take lessons from the world of games and apply them to business problems? So we have a company, which I can't say much more about, which is dead on that target. And we would love, it's great adrenaline to try to figure out how to do it in the game. And we looked at building stuff, and we haven't cracked that one. If you got a great one, come talk to me, but I haven't seen it.
The other thing I was just going to say on that is look in the game for ideas, because people are building things that don't exist right now in reality. So if there are lots of innovations going on in particular areas that don't exist in reality, those are interesting things to take a look at.
So two examples of working system. The way I think about games is these are basically simulated interactive collaboration environments, right? And you can do anything in those environments. So if you look at the prediction market like you have at Google, it's really a game that is designed in a certain way, and you can design it at different levels of reality. I take it one step further, think about education. I think in the education area, you have a lot of potential for these games because this is an environment where you can actually do lots of things that would be very expensive to do otherwise. And that's an area where you could replace a lot of human labor with technology, speaking about my incentives on that.
Sorry, just kind of a step forward. As a startup, when you're evaluating an opportunity, most times you build a company around a product or an opportunity. But it gets to a point where you're at that inflection point and you're no more a startup. So how best do you assess when you're approaching that point, and how do you know when to build products around your company? Otherwise, that is, for example, mid-stage, let's say, companies can build products around the companies. That is, because they have the skills there, the company, they can build the products around that. But startups, cannot do that exactly. So the late stage could be ambidextrous. Well, as a startup, all you can do is just build a company around some product that you already have and monetize it. So how do you know when to kind of monetize, as well as also to build products around the company that already exists?
I'm going to answer what maybe that question or a slightly different question. And it's about the way companies morph over time. And again, my comment before about building a product versus building a company. And so let me give you sort of a hierarchy of answers here. First of all, there are many, many projects, products, or companies which you shouldn't try to get venture capital for. You can be very successful. You can make a pile of money, but you don't want third-party investors breathing down your neck, demanding growth and a $100 million valuation on an exit. And God bless people who do that. And they're the vast majority of companies and small businesses in this country. And there's a tremendous amount of wealth that gets built there. That's different than where I live in the ecology of building companies. So at the early stage, there's always this conflict of, do you have an underlying technology and you do a seed investment because the technology is really cool and you have no idea where to deploy it. Now, these are sometimes called science experiments. Knock on wood, a couple of them have worked really well for me, but one of them took 16 years to work really well for me as we struggled to find the right product to take advantage of the miracle technology. Hopefully they're further along, you have an idea, and the best ones are where you have a unique technical platform underneath, you have an initial idea of the product that you will get into the market, and you have a scoping of where else you would go using this technology in other applications or other products. But what sometimes happens is that you, either with the underlying technology or the first product, and you learn some things and you have some strength, and then the question is, well, you have a bunch of customers and you have a footprint with these customers, and they want to buy more stuff from you, but they don't particularly care that it's that first thing you built. And you're sitting there and you say, well, yeah, they really buy microphones, but by the way, I also could use some of this or something else. I don't make any of those, but I'm going to go figure out how to make them because I have the account control in the field sales organization. So you often have, IBM rarely has the leading best product in any category. What they have is unbelievable customer relationships, and they will find whatever they can to sell to their customers. So I'm not sure if this is 100% responsive to your question, but there are these sort of two phases, although for us at the early stage, it's really sort of, is there some technology, is there a product, is there a market for that, and is there at least a vision of what you're going to do next? Now you can say, I'm going to do the one product, and I'm going to sell as many as I can and shut the company down. Probably not something you want to ask me to invest in. Or I'm going to do it, and I'm going to try to sell it with a very modest amount of money and a real rifle shot. And we have some people around the table who've done this very successfully that said, I'm going to get to exactly this point, and I'm going to go try to sell this thing before I have to build out a whole suite of products or a direction beyond that.
I think what you're asking, though, it mirrors the financing needs of a company, too. I think so the phases are, sort of initial idea, validation, get an early product out, and maybe start getting some revenue and customers. And then at that point, can you either raise more capital based on the business that you've built to go do some other things, or are you generating enough cash flow from your current business to go do something else? And that's kind of maybe the next phase. So the initial phase, like you said, is to just kind of build out and focus on solving a problem and get some validation and some success doing that. So.
What I'd like to do now is just thank this wonderful panel.